Assassin's Creed Shadows launched with both an anticipated build-up, with all of us fans of the series being teased for years about a possible story centered on the Japanese Brotherhood, after seeing the room of sculptures in Assassin's Creed 2 that confirmed guilds in Asia, with a sculpture of Wei Yu, the Chinese assassin. We waited in anticipation for over a decade to see a Japanese story get told in full, as other titles like Ghost of Tsushima and Rise of the Ronin came out years later, but still before Assassin's Creed Shadow's release. As the first two games came out before, they created an arguably high standard for what open-world ancient Japan experience could be. When it came to Assassin's Creed connection to Japan, we knew about Hanzo and how he would be a link between Altair, Ezio, and the Chinese Brotherhood via Xiao Jun, the lead character of Assassin's Creed China. Another name we should mention is Kulan Gal, an assassin connected to the Mongolian Guild and the man that helped Altair's son Darim take down Genghis Khan. All these assassins were part of the overall Brotherhood guilds of ancient Asia. Most notably, to this video, of course, we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive and go into what should have been Assassin's Creed Shadow's timeline of events surrounding Alvaro Kataribera and Fujibayashi Nagato, and Hattori Hanzo, Tsuyu, and Iga Iki, which is a non-affiliated Assassin's Guild that Naoe is eventually born into and the main focus of the Shadow story events. The story that Ubisoft put together all these years later throws Naoe in a revenge mission that turns into a normal coming-of-age story similar to that of, Ezio finding out that his father is part of the Brotherhood, and then after tragedy, he becomes one with the Creed. Naoe shares this same fate, but with the differences she's bred and born into the lifestyle of training and learning the Creed from birth, along with being trained as a shinobi. We also get Yasuke thrown in the mix, with him being a slave that gets set free by Oda Nobunaga, the daimyo, which is a ruler of a set of lands in Japan. While they hold power, the shogun is essentially their leader that rules all of Japan. Nobunaga sets free and has Yasuke trained as a samurai, since he's a 6-foot-plus black guy in Japan and can intimidate most people. I will say, Yasuke's personality is that of a gentle giant in this portrayal, but we'll get into more of that a little bit later on. Yasuke is there in person for the destruction of Iga, which is where the story shifts to Naoe, and we see the village burn down and her father getting killed in front of her, setting up Naoe's story of revenge and seeking the box which holds a mysterious item, which, if you're familiar with Assassin's Creed, you'll know it's most likely an Isu artifact. And I won't get into the Isu history because that's a whole other video worth of information, but just know the artifacts are from what we consider the gods, and the DNA of those gods was trickled down to humans to make those born into the Brotherhood basically stand out as half gods instead of just normal people with a gift being the vision, basically that vision being kind of wall hacks and sonar ability. Yeah, welcome to modern day Assassin's Creed. And the drive to make the world a better place. Typical hero behavior, and yes, that part of Assassin's Creed has polluted the storyline for years now, but this video is focused on just the Shadow story, so... Alright, now that I've gone over a bit of franchise history and Ubisoft's storyline for Shadows, it's time to get into the guild members of the Japanese Brotherhood that makes up, the Assassin's Creed of Japan. Where is their story? Well, this is where some good news and some bad news comes into play. The good news is their story is actually told, and it's well done written. The bad news is it's pushed into side quests, and it's part of Naoe's personal story. Now, Yasuke has his own personal quest, which is really short, so I'll just quickly get into it. Basically, he and his mother were slaves working on a ship when his mother is killed by the slave owner captain. And before she gets shot in the head, Yasuke overhears the owner or captain asks who she contacted, which I'm thinking she had some connection to the Brotherhood possibly. And then we see an assassin sneak on board for who knows what reason and fights with everyone on board while yelling at Yasuke to run while he gets stabbed to death. Yeah, it feels kind of forced, to be honest. I mean, but it also felt like it should have been, a sport character's backstory of some kind. I mean, in fact, everything about Yasuke feels like he's a support character to Naoe. But for some reason, Ubisoft had to force him into being a main character, second playable guy. I wonder why that might be. Now that that's out of the way, let's dive into what the storyline should have looked like. The funniest part of this is I'm going to be actually using mostly the storyline that is present in game, just rearranging it to make the overall story flow better, and about the Japanese Brotherhood Guild and the Assassin's Creed connected to it, and less about the, slave turned samurai guy. Yes, so this quote is actually, in fact, buried in the game's collectibles instead of part of the main story.
When I was initiated into the Brotherhood, I swore, among many things, to stay my blade from innocent flesh. As I uttered my oath, I nearly choked on emotion. I felt it sing in my soul. A cruel twist of fate, perhaps, that this oath would turn out to be my undoing. A pursuit gone wrong, a miscalculation on my part. A young girl, fear and confusion etched into her lifeless eyes. My hidden blade, bright and sticky, with the waxy sheen of her blood. To this day, I do not know her name. It's likely for the best. One thing to have nightmares, another thing to know them on a first-name basis. A nightmare that has pursued me since my excommunication from the Brotherhood. From Spain to far-flung ports, Malacca, Formosa. That song I once felt, that once stirred my heart. Silent. And then Macau, where I was shaken. Briefly from my drunken haze. A discussion between two men, Templars. Talking in the open, boldly, and unquestioned. I listened intently as they spoke of an expedition in the chain of islands they called Japan. They departed, and I followed. In the year of 1549, I landed at Nagasaki. The arrival of Francisco Javier's delegation provided ample cover and access. I absorbed as much as I could, testing the instinct I was certain had faded since I violated the Brotherhood's 3 tenets. Since I stumbled from the path I had coveted for so long. I was wrong. My instinct simply hibernated, waiting for a new war. And in the land of Japan, I had found it. Or, it found me. Couldn't fight it alone. I would need allies, soldiers. Progress is slow, but promising. And she is promising as well. A Japanese girl that I saved. Her arm has shriveled from starvation. I wonder how her wrist can bear the weight of a hidden blade. But I recognize the look in her eyes. She's determined to learn. Has the potential to become lethal. To open her heart to the music that once guided me. A tune I had not expected to hear again. Before my day of atonement comes, I am content to do what I have always done. Kill in the name of freedom. To prove my faith in the name of a brotherhood that will not have me. And the new one I will build. The nightmare, it will subside.
All right, so the first cinematic CGI cutscene and section should have seen Alvaro in the situation that ended in him breaking the creed and being excommunicated, forcing him to leave his original guild and see him travel to Japan while going over his vision for a new guild of Brotherhood and forming the Kakushibi Iki alongside his apprentice Tsuyu. Now, Tsuyu should have been the first playable character, which would have just been an easy model swap of Naoe's animations and likeness and, into Tsuyu's character, and could have served as a tutorial missions. This would lead into meeting Nagato and introducing Hattori Hanzo, and we could see the dynamic of at least one, for at least one chapter, the dynamic between all three of the eventual leaders of Iga, and through these three start to hear of Oda Nobunaga. We could then also see the love triangle and eventual turmoil that turns Hanzo into what everyone called Oni Hanzo. Since there's established lore already written about Nagato and Hanzo fighting to show Sendayu, I'm pretty sure I'm saying these names right, but yeah, Sendayu, the master assassin that trains both Hanzo and Nagato, and how Sendayu sees potential in Nagato, which leads to Hanzo getting basically jealous. After this, a time jump of sorts should have set up Nagato and Tsuyu training together and becoming closer, with Hanzo becoming more unhinged because of it. That would lead into Hanzo coming back after leaving to find Naoe was born. So with Naoe now in the picture, this would lead to a possible time jump to Tsuyu receiving a message from the Brotherhood, Alvaro, and having to leave for a mission, which would set up the Tsuyu is dead and Hanzo playing Nagato using his grief angle. This would lead into mostly what Ubisoft did put together with the Naoe train cutscenes and section that we play through and the eventual downfall of Iga. The cutscene where Nagato tells Naoe on the ride out to the village about Tsuyu and the Brotherhood that is hidden in Naoe's personal storyline, that should have been front and center in this starting moment. And that would be an even bigger lead up to the eventual Nagato death scene and the setup of Naoe going into like shinobi hunter mode aimed for the Shinbakufu, or as we later know them as, the Templars. Now, a quick side note to mention, according to Assassin's Creed Wiki, historically, Fujibayashi Nagato had a son. He's a real guy in history, has a son who does not appear nor is even mentioned in the game, and there's no recorded mentions of a daughter. So that, Xiao's is about as reliable as a history lesson as a modern history book is. So they kind of twisted history around and made some stuff up. Now, after Naoe passes out alongside the body of her father, we should have just ended up at the hideout instead of up in the mountains, but either way, the story should have 100% cut over to Hanzo secretly talking with Nobunaga, and that's where we would first see Yasuke as a side character. In my opinion, Yasuke would have worked so much better as just a side character that is connected to the Brotherhood and known or heard of Tsuyu and Hanzo and the Shinbakufu. Along with that, there would be a legit reason for Ubisoft to put Yasuke so close to Nobunaga outside of just, slave trade and and that would set up a storyline payoff for his mother contacting the Brotherhood possibly to get Yasuke out of slavery so he could then act as eyes and ears and potentially help build another branch of the Brotherhood in Japan. That would lead to Naoe coming in contact with Yasuke, and he could lead her to the Assassin's Creed secret lair by translating the book like he does in game in the side quests. Could have been left by Tsuyu for Naoe to find. what the creed is and what the creed does and the tenets you must follow the same way she actually does in game, but this would make it more centered in the main storyline. This way, Yasuke would become a support character instead of the forced hero second playable character he was turned into. The story past this would actually be the same takedown of the Shinbakufu that Ubisoft did, but Yasuke would again only just be a side character helping out Naoe from time to time while he works in the shadows to serve the light, possibly trading info with Alvaro and Nobunaga. See what I did there? The last main storyline quest in taking down the Shinbakufu should have been the ending of the Meaning of the Blade storyline that they actually have in the game, which is Naoe's side quest. Its setup would be the cliffhanger surrounding Tsuyu and the big question that we are now actually waiting for the answer to: is Tsuyu actually dead? Or maybe she's still alive. This moment would be punctuated by the scene we see in Naoe's side story, with Hanzo telling Naoe about his love for her mother and tensions and jealousy of her father. I think this scene with Naoe versus Hanzo is the best way to end the main story of Shadows and set up the excellent, cliffhanger for the extra story DLC that will most likely fully set up the Templars and the connection that Yasuke has to them, and see Naoe reunited with her mother, possibly. We'll see. As I said earlier, Assassin's Creed Shadows has all the storyline moments, but it is missing some as well, and the way the story is forced together really showcases what was said by the former writers of the original drafts of the story. The original story centered around a monk named Taka that finds his way to the Creeds through Hanzo, which in all honesty doesn't actually fully make sense since Hanzo was established as a character in other lore sources. The real question remains, if because of the outside sources Ubisoft always has looking at their content, did that make a move to finding the one black guy in Japan that has been controversially showcased, and many fans and samurai historians in Japan see Yasuke as not even being a real samurai. Also making Yasuke a playable secondary character and making him possibly gay with certain player choices when it comes to romance options is a bit of almost character defamation, if you will, at best. We know who forced the changes in the storyline, but at least we have most of the original storyline info that was told in the other spin-off stories to tell a decent thought-out story timeline of events leading to Naoe being the hero of Japan that we actually have written out in the game. I enjoy the moments in Shadows where I stumbled upon Naoe's personal story, and Ubisoft's version of Field Japan is fun to run around in. The depictions of most of the historical figures seems to be well done, while you have to keep in mind also nobody truly knows how these people like Nobunaga actually acted, because it's all passed down knowledge that can be changed through hundreds of years of storytelling and all that, translations, errors, maybe, who knows. Talking about storytelling, I also want to make a quick mention of the only way to make the credits roll in Shadows is, again, by going through Naoe's side missions, which is basically insane because it's her personal side missions that are not part of the main Shinbakufu missions. So it's totally missable and skippable if you're not actually looking for it. Assassin's Creed Shadows overall does what it's trying to do, but I think the upcoming DLC extra storyline moments, it might act like a director's cut of sorts to fill in the blanks of the story that we don't get to see. Until then, we'll just have to wait to see what happens next with the Assassin's Brotherhood of Japan.